So welcome to our Everything Marketplaces workshop today, which is going to be on low frequency marketplaces. So if this is your first community workshop, welcome. In our workshops, where domain experts join us to walk us through topics that are relevant to us all as marketplace founders and teams here. They're typically 30-minute or so presentations, followed by a group Q&A. So that said, I'm really excited to welcome on Vivek Kumar, who some of you actually might know as he's a previous group chat guest. But if not, he recently led product at PropertyGuru, is also a Reforge instructor, and overall a top mind when it comes to low frequency marketplaces. Right before I do let Vivek take over, I once again want to mention that this is going to be about a 30-minute or so presentation followed by a group Q&A. So if you have any questions, you can post them in the Zoom chat. Just be sure to turn on your camera and use the Zoom raise hand functionality so that way we know to call on you during the group Q&A. Huge thanks for taking the time to join us here in advance, Vivek. Now I'll actually just let you start with a brief intro and take it over from here.
Great. Today's topic is going to be about how do you manage a low frequency, episodic, infrequent product. So whatever you choose to call it. I've seen that last week I was talking to a McKinsey partner and the choice of words were, oh, this is an episodic product. So I've seen that various names have cropped up, but over my career, I found that this is one of the hardest to manage, and that's kind of my employee value prop as well. That's the tease that I usually get when I want to hire someone. And I say that, have you really run an infrequent product? Come and run, and you'll see the challenges associated with that. And ICE theory is an outcome of asking a lot many questions over the years, and then this playbook has emerged. So infrequent products, per my definition, there is no research around this, but just a heuristic is that, anything that is taking transactions less than once in 3 months, you start having issues that surround an infrequent product. What the issues are, we'll see in a bit, but the examples include property, car purchase, travel, medical. These are the ones which would be, I come across a lot of infrequent products in my daily life. Even Bright is one, Bose speakers are one, Expedia, PayPal. In my days in PayPal's active user definition was once, if someone transacts once a year, they're deemed to be an active user. So my last 13 years I've spent managing these products. I was TurboTax, most of you would know, based in the US. PayPal, again, as I said, was deemed as an infrequent product. My startup, which was targeting alumni for the unis, that was an infrequent product. And PropertyGuru, the last one where we IPO'd in NYC, that again was taking care of properties in Southeast Asia, again, a massive infrequent product. And through these products, the questions remain the same, which are like, how do you find the product market fit? What is the role of retention in this product? How do you even think about retention in these products? And so the answer to those questions are what we'll see in the subsequent slides. Look, the reason why I find it extremely hard to manage these products are three major reasons, right? One is when the retention is weak, or when the retention doesn't happen, the nature of the product is to churn. You see that it impacts the recall, and so you need to do something to bring the recall time back again. Second is there is a business viability challenge as well. So there was this very interesting chat I was having with someone based in India recently. And so just to let you know, if you have friends in India, Indian weddings are one of the biggest, big fat weddings that happen. And you're talking about spend of close to 500K, 200K, north of that. Now, what was interesting is the dating platforms in India, however, make only a minuscule out of the entire spend. So their average subscription price is, let's say, USD $50. So the max make, a person during their lifetime might subscribe 2 to 3 times. And so the average revenue per person would be not more than $150 in a wedding that's going to cost you maybe 200K or something like that. And that seems like a massive mismatch because the core aspect of a wedding is the partner, and that you pay almost $150, but the whole celebration, takes you a lot more. So the business viability always is a challenge given the infrequency of a product. The third is the paid marketing campaigns always impact margins. One of my favorite examples in this, and you will see me mention time and again, is Expedia. 40+% of the revenue goes into the acquisition cost, and that's humongous. So how do you then manage this? Because you're infrequent, you need to go out and have paid acquisition to bring customers in. So the way to look at this is low frequency products don't appeal to everybody in the market, and that's something for you to bear in mind. Look, the first part of the presentation, before I go further, is going to be largely about the construct of the low frequency product. Because once you understand the construct, the way things are, you can formulate your own strategies and theories to counter that, and you can also profile your product, saying that what is in it, how is my product structured, and what are the ways in which I can now dimension that. So that's what the larger part of the presentation is, and then later during the presentation, I'll deep dive into one particular aspect. Let's say the infrequency aspect, and then we'll talk a little more detail about that as to how do we counter infrequency as a dimension. Now, low frequency products don't appeal to everybody in the market. It's good and it's bad. It's good and bad because unlike, let's say, an Uber Eats, you're not going to refer everybody when you have a great experience. It's not easy to refer out, or even if you refer out, let's say I'm referring Mike to go out and try Uber Eats. Mike could jump on immediately and he can start doing, trying it out. But in the infrequent product, let's say I just bought a property from Zillow and I go out and tell Mike that, Mike, do you want to go out and find this property? The referral loop breaks there. One, Mike may not be looking for a property, so the referral doesn't make sense, so I may not refer him out. Second, once he comes on board, or he might take a long time to even go act on that referral. So that's another part. So the virality time is pretty long and the viral cycle itself is broken. But the flip side of this is if you can instrument this somehow, you'll find that that's the biggest moat that this business will carry ever. So coming back to what the penetrability means, some products by nature are penetrable. Example, I can ask you to buy Nike shoes and travel and health. I can say, go out and check out this app that seems like pretty cool. But on the other side, things that are non-penetrable are jobs, housing, dates, etc. So at a time in the market, there's only a certain part of the available market which is focused on that category. Properties, only a certain set of the market. Jobs, only a certain set of the market. So that constrains you from actually going out and appealing to a larger set of audience. You work with only those set of audience which is available in the market for this. Now, this is true for most products, but given the high value sometimes that you encounter with infrequency, it makes the game even more complicated. Now, infrequency is a spectrum. On one side, you find really high infrequent products. Example, Zillow, where properties are sought out once in 7 years, 10 years, possibly once or twice in a lifetime. Midway somewhere is these furniture products like Wayfair. On the extreme left, you have things like Expedia, where you can travel once in a while. The second aspect, so the first aspect that we saw was around infrequency. The second aspect is about how much control do you have over experience, because no control over experience crosses a lot of opacity. So an example would be a good dating app. So no matter how good your matching algorithm is, it doesn't know how the effect was because the date happens outside of the app, and the reactions of this doesn't get translated back into the app. So the control over experience is pretty important, especially if you're operating as an information aggregator site. Most often that happens. Example, job site is another great example where you wouldn't know what exactly happens outside of your job apps. How does the interview go? What is the candidate experience? And that doesn't get fed back again into the matching algorithm. So without control over experience, it's hard to serve the customers well. So on one side, you see TurboTax and Open Door kind of products, which has got complete control. On the other side, you have things like Indeed, which doesn't have which has a certain degree of opacity after the person submits the job application. So, and this is another way to look at how different products are structured. Example, as I said, Quora is possibly a complete set of contained transaction within it. You don't go to Quora possibly every day. We go on an intermittent basis. Whereas on the other side of the spectrum, you have things like, let's say, house.com or a Credit Karma, which essential part of the product is actually delivered outside of the product. And somewhere in the middle, you have things like Airbnb. Again, the closure of the transaction happens on the product, but the core experience of how that places actually happens outside of the product. So that kind of gives you a dimension as to what the spectrum looks like when you're thinking about this. The third is sometimes the more the infrequency or the more the value, the more important is the engagement of the product. So when you don't have engagement, it impacts customer loyalty. And so this is kind of important. I'm gonna distinguish a bunch of different types of engagement you will have within within an infrequent product. So example, if you're looking at Carvana, higher the value, the more the infrequency and more the engagement, the amount of deliberation that you will do in the decision making while buying a car is going to be very different from you sending money to your peer on a PayPal. So they're on two different spectrums. On one side, it's extremely high engagement when you know that the high value, high infrequency product is there. On the other side, when the stakes are not that high, the engagement may not be that intense. So engagement by itself has got three subcategories. So example, the hardest part of the product to manage is any product that falls on this left side of the spectrum is so going to be not easy. I mean, if they check all the boxes on the left side, you're going to have a bit of journey to kind of get them through the other side. Example, if it's highly complex as a property site, when I was running PropertyGuru, the cadence of people coming onto the website was just amazing. So for the 8 months they're buying property, you see that for 4 long months, they're coming onto the platform almost thrice or 4 times a day. And the habit creation is just intense, even in an infrequent product. That's also because it's very complex and there's a lot of variables that go into a decision making and buying a house. Single touch. So touch is very important concept. What that means is you don't have complete connection with the product, or you're not in constant touch with the product. Example, you buy a Nike shoe. Once you buy the shoe, it's always with you. I mean, when you're running, you could possibly wear it every day, similar to a phone that you buy once in a while, but you carry the phone every time along. That's a constant touch product. Whereas a TripAdvisor is something that you go read the review and then you move on from there. So that's a single touch product. And the last thing is about the retention, because the whole journey of engagement is about how do you solve for retention? And there are two kinds of retention to dimension. One is predictable retention. The other one is what you call as unpredictable retention. So for instance, in TurboTax, you know that these guys are going to come every year to file your taxes. Now, it would be TurboTax, it could be InsurTech, depending on the products that you're working on. There is a degree of predictability that you can associate with that. But whereas a job, it's very unpredictable as to when someone will start looking out for the next jobs, when someone will look out for the next date, when will someone start looking out for the next property. And these are not easy things to nudge and start making them act towards you as well. So there's a degree of unpredictability on the retention as well. So again, as I said, look, this is more about you to understand the parts and the attributes of the product so that the strategies to manage them can be your own eventually. Complexity, again, is a spectrum. As I said, Zillow's on one side, PayPal is another side. The higher the complexity, the more the decision is, which we've already spoken about. For instance, Carvana takes a lot more time as against a DocuSign, which is going to be a very simple and a low involvement product. The strategy again for a single touch in the constant touch is, I mean, again, the attributes again here is single touch and constant touch. Constant touch example would be something like Stitch Fix. You once buy a Stitch Fix and then you wear it, and if you like it and people are complimenting you for that, that's going to be a much more constant touch product as against, let's say, a single touch or a strip advisor or a survey monkey, which you might just use once and then leave it. Again, the next one is also the predictability of retention that we spoke about, which will dictate the kind of traffic. We spoke about input on a retention, which is predictable, better.com, which is about, refinancing the mortgages, is possibly unpredictable stuff, because it's not easy to predict as to when this person is going to come out into the market to refinance. You can hope they will, but it's not very easily predictable. So this leads us to a concept of how do we dimension engagement and retention in an infrequent product. Yeah. So we're going to introduce some terms as to how you think about this. So the first thing is, over the journey of the customer, there's a customer lifetime value that remains the same. There's no difference on that. What enables a customer lifetime value in the case of an infrequent product is what I call as the lifetime retention, meaning how many times is a person coming on to the platform to do their core transaction. Example, if someone is coming every year for the last 10 years to TurboTax to file their taxes, then that's a lifetime retention. That's how you think about lifetime retention. Then you talk about what you call as the active retention. Now, active retention is you take a certain number of sessions to do your core transaction within a particular year. Example, if a person is coming, so TurboTax, again, for those of you who've never used it, asks you a bunch of questions on the tax regarding your situation about jobs and various aspects of life, and helps you file the right taxes. Yeah. Now, in order to do that, what we've seen is people used to take almost 3 to 4 hours to get through their tax filing. Now, that 3 to 4 hours is an active retention. So you do a particular in each year when you come in, you need multiple sessions in order to complete that journey. So you need to do multiple sessions in order to complete the tax filing, and then you do a tax filing over a period of lifetime. So there is a lifetime retention concept, and the question is about how do you ensure that they're engaged enough for active retention. And now that you have these terms, then the question is, based on the previous aspects that we learned, unpredictable retention, predictable retention, constant touch, how do we employ these active retention and lifetime retention to the best effect? And that's something that we will see in the subsequent slides. Anything else I need to tell you? I think this is good. Okay. So the last thing is about being distinctive. So one of the issues that you possibly want to avoid is being low frequency and also being very commoditized in the market. So how do you make yourself distinctive? So if you look at the spectrum, Expedia, and you have a ton of other travel sites, and so they look like another one out there, although they might have a higher brand recall. But essentially, the offering seems much more commoditized to that of sometimes Booking.com, Agoda, and a whole bunch of other travel sites out there, whereas Airbnb seems to be distinctive. And this, you see, that is actually getting translated into their traffic acquisition as well. I mean, while Airbnb has 60% organic traffic to almost another 30% of them direct traffic, with only 5% into the paid. I don't know if the mix has changed recently. This is 1 or 2 years back. And Expedia, as I said earlier, almost 45% of the traffic is a paid traffic that they need to look at, because there's no distinction over this. So it's important that you remain distinctive, especially in a low frequency product. So example of distinctiveness is Airbnb, Reforge, for people who have not known. And if in the days when it started, Coursera was good, but then there are a whole bunch of online platforms that came in for education. And the question is, how do you stand out still? And whatever you're offering, is it still distinctively valid? So So now they're just cobbling everything back together. So we think about infrequency, which is I, that increases the penetrability of the market. So how can you appeal to more people in the market? It is also a lever for you to increase the lifetime retention of the product. So what we spoke about is getting people to file taxes year on year. So I is a way for you to manage that part of the product. The second part is the control over experience, which is about increasing your ability to monetize, which means when you dial up the control over experience, usually you see that the products that lack control over experience are information aggregators. Example, a job app is largely nothing but an information aggregator. But base examples of this would be things like I don't know if you've seen if you've heard of Cars24. It's a firm based in India which has grown rapidly over the last few years. They're close to 300 mil USD in terms of revenue. And what they've done really well is dial up the entire car selling experience, very similar to that of Open Door. You walk into the store, they review the car, they auction it out, and you walk out with a check back in no time. And that control over your experience increases the ability to monetize. Unlike a car classifieds platform, they will get to monetize a larger chunk of the platform the transaction as against another classifieds platform. Another great example is Open Door as well. Now, engagement focuses on active retention, and so it increases the retention or the organic traffic within the product. And the last thing is distinctiveness, which appeals to margins. I talked about how one of the biggest problems within a low frequency product is acquisition of users, and how do you acquire users? So being distinctive helps you dial up the organic traffic part of this. So this is ICE theory. You have multiple strategies to counter each of these dimensions and go towards managing them in a better way. But today we'll be focusing on the infrequency part of it, and we'll deep dive into it. So how do we manage these products? Richard Barton, the guy who's come time and again created these products, is a great, he's done some brilliant playbooks within these products, Glassdoor, Expedia, Zillow. So there's a lot to learn from him in terms of how he has managed these products. So quickly, these 4 dimensions, based on where you're mapping out your product, you need to go from, if you're on the left, you need to move towards the right. That's kind of the flow that you're going to go through. So if your product is extremely infrequent, move towards that of the frequency there. You don't have much control over experience, bring in a bit of control over experience or close the loop with your customers. If it's low engagement, dial up the engagement. If it's not distinctive, go towards the distinctive part. This is possibly one of the most important product concepts. I've written an article on this. We may not have time to deep dive into the exact mechanics of product market fit. Recommend you, if you have time, to go out and read the article. But the fundamental thesis for a product market fit comes from the fact that, and look, this is also a moment where I felt like most of the times the playbook that we are left to manage with is from the Zingers of the world, or in the early days, those high frequency products. Whatever playbook that we created is what we started out the product management with, which is not wrong, which is good. A lot of good stuff in there, but some of those things cannot be easily transposed into a low frequency product. The fundamental definition of product market fit in a place like Zynga, Facebook, and what have you, has got this retention curve going up. The more your cohorts engage or retain, the better your product market fit. And that it's a continuum, and you progress along the journey. In the case of infrequent product, the retention doesn't exist. A person who comes to seek a job will eventually churn out after looking for a job. So then the question is, how do you define product market fit? The product market fit here is a function of the penetration of the market. The more you penetrate the market, the better your product market fit is. And I give you a simple example. The way I think about an infrequent product is, let's say you and I are selling mobile phones, which is an infrequent product that you need to purchase. So we set up a store in some part of the city, let's say some good part of the city where there's good footfall. We find that enough people are buying from us. We're getting enough cash in the bank, and then using that cash, we're opening more stores, and that will get us more people to buy from us. And that's the penetration that you're looking at. That's the product market fit in a simple terms, because your product is now selling to a lot more people in the market. That's what you're looking at. So the infrequent products definition of product market fit is a function of penetration, market penetration, as against retention. So there's a complete blog. You can go out and look into whatever I told you into much more details. I passed that even further. But where does ICE theory fit in? So as you say, ICE theory is more of a product market fit, but it talks more about how do you grow the business once you've achieved the product market fit. That's just a small component of ICE theory. But overall, how do you work this in tandem with other growth loops to grow the business is what we're looking at. Besides this, I'll also tell you some of the interesting things I discovered when I was going through this is that matter of fact, there are a couple of attributes you want to focus on your product. Most high frequency products, especially high value products, are very macro factor dependent, meaning if the economy does well, your property market will do well. If your economy does well, your jobs app will do well. I mean, there's so many, I mean, dating doesn't have to do anything with the economy, but the rest, but you will see that there is a bit of an economic impact on this. And what is very interesting is when you go dial up the frequency, the frequency actually makes you much more resilient. Example, if we strip LinkedIn off UGC content, their user-generated content right now, it's just nothing but a job app. And the job app will be then subject to the ebbs and flows of the economy, whichever market's strongest for them. But slap in a UGC layer, it doesn't matter what the economy is. People still will flock to LinkedIn almost on an everyday basis. The resiliency gets built in because the frequency is up. So the second part is there seasonal versus non-seasonal. Look, in my days in TurboTax, the way it used to work is the tax filing season used to be the most rigorous days for us. Those 3-4 months, we used to almost have sleepless nights, incident management, and just handling doing the customer study, because that's when you're going to see the most of the customers. Versus there are non-seasonal products, so you need to keep this in mind as you think about the product. And the last thing is that whether your product is an impulsive buy or a deliberate buy. Buying a Nike shoe, if Mike refers me, is going to be like a lot more an impulsive purchase, whereas a job, a date, a property, a car, all of these are going to be on the deliberate end of the purchase. So I think these are some examples I've had. Let me just jump into the infrequency. So we talked about 4 dimensions, I, C, E, D. What we're trying to see here is how do we manage the degree of infrequency. Just reminding you again, infrequency is a spectrum. You can feel free to plot where your product lands in the infrequency spectrum, depending on the frequency of usage that you think it is. Zillow's on one end, Expedia is on the other end. And the issue that we have with the infrequency is a low product recollection, as you don't engage with the product, it eventually dies down. So the question is, how do you revive the frequency back over a period of time to improve the recall of the product? And so the strategy is then to move from infrequent on the extreme left to the frequency. And doing so will ensure that it increases the penetrability of the market. And we'll see examples of how. So how do we do that? So the first one is what I look at is what I call as a timing known and easy to influence strategy. So what that means is if you're looking at a 2x2 matrix in terms of on one dimension, you've got how easy it is to influence the customers to take the action, and the second is, do you know the timing of their transaction? Would you know, or can you predict the timing of transaction? Or upon these two, if you map it out, There are things like properties, dating and job, which is very hard to influence. It's very hard to influence to date someone, to make someone look for a job or buy a property, and it's very unknown as to when they will start looking at for this. There are things like you can do a reasonable degree of prediction as to when someone will refinance their mortgage, but not necessarily you will know it for sure. But it's again hard to influence. It's one of the big decisions that someone will take. Um, the Where the frequency is easier and the timing is known is something like travel, taxes. If I've got Mike's tax filing from last year, easy to nudge and tell him that, okay, why don't we come in? But if I know that his travel pattern is he travels in July every year, then easy for me to nudge him there. And the last thing is easy to influence, but I really don't know when someone will start using it, is a freelancing service like Upwork and your Fivers and those categories. Now, once you map this out as to where your product is within this spectrum, the strategy is to go from the left-hand side, and if you fall on the left-hand side of the boxes, to go into the right-hand side of the boxes. So if you're on 3 and 4, then your strategy is to go to 2 and 1. The eventual path is to go to 1, which is pretty hard. So if you see this indicator on the top, I would say that the strategy is easy to understand, but difficult to implement. So that's the hard part of it. So let's look at an example. So if you look at the way LinkedIn has grown over a period of time, LinkedIn started as an aggregation of profiles in 2004. Then they slapped on the job use case on top, which came about in 2008 or 2009, if I'm not wrong. And then post that, they stayed like that for quite some time. And that's hard to influence, and timing is unknown. You cannot predict when someone is looking for a job, and it's very hard to influence. So what they did is they slapped on this UGC layer on top of it, which they moved from 4 to 1, and that dialed up the frequency extremely well for them. So that's the strategy. And not many people can make this transition. And that's why I said this is hard as well. Most people have taken this playbook and have tried implementing it. One, cracking UGC by itself is not easy. I mean, UGC is one example. There are other ways to move this. But if you're thinking about this, the ability to get this right may be a bit hard. But if you do it, the benefit that you reap is going to be phenomenal. One, the recall is going to be high. The penetrability is going to be high. Now, LinkedIn appeals to more people in the market at any point of time, irrespective if they're looking for a job or not, because they've got a layer of UGC as against Indeed, which doesn't have that. So that's a big distinction that we want to carry on. The second strategy is to focus on the gap between the interactions by adding adjacent use cases. So basically, how do you dial up the lifetime retention by adding other people to come in? So Zillow's estimate, for those of you who know, is a great example of how to look at this. Now, Zestimate has been in a bit of controversy recently, but without getting into whether Zestimate by itself is, the validity of this Zestimate, I urge you to focus on the concept behind it, which is when you purchase a property, until the next property, there's nothing much to do. You don't have an engagement with Zillow. And I think Zestimate, in my opinion, was a great move to dial up the frequency of your engagement, to come back here quite often. And so that every quarter or every semester, you're being reminded that this is your property value and Zillow is top of mind. So your acquisition of the users then becomes much more organic as against going out and acquiring them. The recall becomes higher. So adding in an adjacent use case is a very good ploy in terms of engaging your customers. Same thing with Airbnb as well. And I think this was a pandemic child for them. When nobody was using Airbnb, they introduced the online experience to increase frequency. The product is still there. And I'm thinking about the usage. Airbnb by itself, if your travel is, let's say, twice a year or once a year, then the online experiences dial up the frequency of you using Airbnb. The third part of this is what I call as latch onto a habit product or layer a habit product. So what I mean by that is latching onto a habit product means if your product is very infrequent, how do you create a habit around this is something that you would want to think about. The first case, is what I would call as this credit card. So look, travel is an infrequent product, but your credit card is something that you use on a daily basis. And those miles that you accrue kind of reminds you of your travel, your favorite airline or whatever that you would have on a much regular basis. So you kind of latched on to that as you spend your credit card and as you look at your monthly bill statements, the miles that you're accruing on your credit card. And that's a great way to layer on and latch on to a habit product that's already existing. So that's one strategy that you've got. The other strategy that you've come across is what I call as a clock model. The clock model I came across this with Professor Scott Galloway, and I think I really like the way he thinks about this. So he talked about this where he talks about before the purchase and after the purchase, there is a certain time where you can layer on something. So you can split the customer journey into pre-purchase, purchase, and post-purchase. The question is, can you do something in the pre-purchase time, post-purchase time, beyond the purchase time itself? And it seems like companies that have tapped onto those aspects have built a much more stronger brand over the years. So let's look at some examples on this. In our case, when we're looking at an infrequent product, one of the post-purchase stuff that works very well is the Peloton case study. I mean, come to think of it, this is just an exercise equipment buying, which you might do extremely infrequently. And it doesn't appeal to everybody in the market at all. And then Peloton does this genius part of just slapping on this on-demand training use case, and the effects are to be seen as to how they've grown over the past few years. Obviously, there's a bit of pandemic effect to it, but you see that they've just turned around a highly low-frequency product into that of a frequency product, a much more habit-creating product by just slapping in layering a habit use case. Similarly, there is another aspect which is very peculiar to India, the place that I come from, and especially in the southern part of India. And this is in the pre-purchase model. So in the way they purchase gold jewelry, there's a lot of fascination towards gold in the southern part of India. So what they do is they go out and in order to purchase, since it's a high value item, the jeweler shop will say that, okay, look, you don't have to pay me everything in one go. If in a way it's a pre-EMI, if you will. So they'll say that, why don't you start paying me $5,000 every month for the next 11 months, and the 12th month I will chip in the $5,000, and here you've got a corpus that you can go and purchase your jewelry from. So for those 12 months, the person is suddenly in a habit mode with a jeweler, and they kind of go out and engage them on a frequent basis till they buy something. And once they buy, they again renew this, and then this cycle continues. I mean, that's a very nice use case nice way of latching in customers into a habit when your purchase is extremely infrequent. And you see similar ploys for this, and at least in Asia, you find that with properties as well, where they've got these pre-purchase models where you start engaging the customers over a period of time in some form or the other with some massive incentive. And that kind of turns the purchase cycle into a much more frequency-based one as against the low-frequency one. All right. It's easier said than done most often when we read these strategies and go back to the real world. There's a kind of a reality check. So here's what, here's what I call a wider, quick way of checking where, when, and how we should use this. So WIDER stands for when should we use this? What is the impact? What's the duration of making this shift? What's the effort in the risk? When we talked about the time influence matrix, which is about LinkedIn moving from just a job site into that of a UGC content, this you would want to employ when you're looking at the next level of growth. Most prop techs, job techs, and I've seen a lot of consumer tech going down this path when they are looking for the next level of growth. The impact is really high, as I mentioned. It's macro factor resilient. It penetrates the market really well. Duration of the shift could be long, given that some of these things would be high risk bets. The effort is high, the execution risk is high. Adding an adjacent use case is just generally to increase the frequency of visits. In our case, we talked about Airbnb, online experience, and then Zillow's estimate. The impact is small to medium. It's not life-changing for you, but it does increase the recall. And it does dial up the direct traffic in a way. Like if you look at Zillow's traffic, it's largely dialed up, and it's largely organic. And so that's pretty impressive. So duration of making the shift is short, effort is low. I mean, execution risk not so much. Latching onto or layering a habit product when the average returns per revenue per customer needs to be increased. So you're looking for ways to engage them even better. Example, Peloton's on-demand use case that they slapped in. Impact is high, and what you're looking at is the effort to be medium to high, and the shift could take some time from medium to long. So that's kind of a way to look at this. Now, this is just one part of the dimension here, the I. What we eventually go to do, so that's I. What we eventually go to do is, the way ICE theory culminates is we end up doing this canvas called ICE theory, which underneath which you will see frequency, control over experience, engagement broken down into those three attributes and how distinctive they are. You map your current product here, and then you would want to see where you want to go towards. The yellow line that delineates where you want to be, depending on the spectrum. Blue determines where you are right now, and that's kind of a way for you to make strategic choices about your product as to what you want to dial up, dial down. This tool could also be used, this tool could also be used as a way to assess how your competition is configured as against you, or where you are right now and where would you want to be. And so we detail this out in much more detail as to where you want to dial up, how do you want to dial up, what are the issues of, and what strategy that you want to employ to do that. Example, in the case of Zillow, in this case, they want to find the ways to reduce the gap of interaction, introduce Zillow's estimate to pull it from a low frequency to a medium frequency. So that's kind of one example of how they dial up the frequency. Similarly, we've got strategies across every pillar that will help you move or stay in us. And you can also choose to stay, like for instance, they might choose to stay in this spot and they say they're not going to go out anywhere else. And depending on your choices, then it'll help you grow the business. Again, reminding you, all these four pillars are appealing to some business decisions that you would want to look at. Example, frequency is about penetrability of the market. Control over experience is increasing the monetization capability. Distinctiveness is about increasing the margins because your traffic is now going to be a lot more direct and organic. And engagement is about strengthening your product market fit and also deepening your retention within this product, as in the active retention within this product. So each one has its own merits as to why they exist. That's all for now. Thank you.
Appreciate it. We are actually out of time here, so I definitely want to kind of be conscious of that. But Vivek, thanks again for taking the time to join us here and walk us through everything. So I'll definitely have a great recap post and show a link to this in the community after, and then also I'll include a link to some of your previous posts on ICE theory too. So that should be super helpful for everyone here. So
thank you. I think Benjamin, quick this thing I've actually talked about this blog where how do you draw a line on the PMF. So you can check that out there. And Sumit, I know you had a question. Maybe we connect on LinkedIn and we can take it from there.
Yeah, on that note too, time for a quick plug. Where can we keep up with you at?
Yeah, LinkedIn is a great way. You'll find me at Vivek Kumar, PropertyGuru. You can search for this and you should find me there. I've just started becoming active on Twitter. So my Twitter handle is I just posted something yesterday, which was a pretty hot take. I said no more roadmaps for product management, so you can start with that.
Awesome. Well, you'll have a lot of marketplace founders and teams here kind of coming your way as followers. So we really appreciate it. This is definitely an awesome kind of a masterclass on low frequency or infrequent products and marketplaces here. So we really appreciate it once again. So thanks for joining us here. So
Thank you. Thank you for having me.